Hollywood has always sold us the dream: perfect faces, perfect bodies, perfect hair. But behind the flawless curls and iconic silhouettes was a different reality, one of breakage, burnout, and beauty held together by pins and illusion. In this second installment, we reveal 12 more old Hollywood legends who wore wigs, not for fashion but because the harsh spotlight took its toll. These were women shaped by pressure, polished by the system, and forced to maintain an image at any cost. Think you've seen it all? Think again. The truth beneath the glamour runs deeper than ever. Sophia Loren, the volume wasn't always hers. Sophia Loren is the very image of Mediterranean beauty, sultry, statuesque, effortlessly radiant. Her dark, voluminous hair became part of her signature allure, a soft halo that framed her unforgettable cheekbones and almond eyes. But behind that cascade of curls was a truth that rarely made it into the magazines. Sophia Loren often wore wigs, not just for roles, but to maintain an ideal that wasn't always naturally sustainable. Her natural hair, while healthy in her early years, was never quite as full or thick as it appeared on screen. And when her career exploded internationally, the demands grew heavier. Hollywood directors wanted her hair bigger, Italian filmmakers wanted it sleeker, and French magazines wanted it perfect at all times. That kind of pressure, along with heat styling and dyeing, quickly took its toll. Wigs offered an elegant solution, not just to hide occasional thinning or damage, but to give her control. Sophia worked closely with stylists to create hairpieces that moved naturally, glowed under camera lights, and captured the fantasy her audience expected. Whether in dramatic updos or cascading curls, she could deliver red carpet perfection without putting her own hair through daily torture. What made it powerful, though, was how seamlessly she blended reality with illusion. For Sophia, wigs weren't about hiding flaws, they were tools of cinematic mastery. Every look was deliberate. Every strand had a role to play. And as always, she made it look effortless. Barbara Stanwyck, no time for touch UPS. Barbara Stanwyck didn't play by Hollywood's rules, she rewrote them. With a career that spanned from pre-code sizzle to noir cool, she was known for her grit, her voice, and her refusal to play the glamour game, unless the role demanded it. And when it did, Barbara knew that wigs could do something even her natural hair couldn't: deliver perfection on a deadline. She wasn't one for frills or fuss. Her natural hair was serviceable, dark, fine, easy enough to manage, but not built to survive the long, grueling studio days or the high-gloss close-ups of the 1940s. She was often cast as the tough dame or the complicated woman, and that meant changing her look at the snap of a clapperboard. So wigs became part of her toolkit. For Barbara, it wasn't about vanity, it was about efficiency. A no-nonsense performer, she preferred wigs over constant restyling, especially when shooting back-to-back scenes across days or locations. With a good wig, she could walk on set at 6 a.m., hit her marks, and be camera-ready in minutes. No rollers, no curling irons, no drama. Off-screen, she wasn't particularly obsessed with appearances. She kept her real hair neat, short, practical. But on screen, she wore wigs like armor, polished, powerful, and always in character. Barbara Stanwyck didn't care if her hair was hers. She cared if the performance was. And as always, it was flawless. Gloria Swanson, the queen of silent film, loud in glamour. Long before Hollywood learned to talk, Gloria Swanson had already mastered the art of being seen. With arched brows, dramatic gowns, and commanding eyes, she didn't need dialogue, she was the spectacle. And like every spectacle carefully engineered for the silver screen, her iconic look was supported by more than makeup and lighting. Her hair was often not her own. Swanson rose to fame in the silent era, when image was everything. There was no voice to carry a performance. Every emotion, every illusion had to be delivered visually. Her hair played a central role in this silent storytelling, often styled into intricate updos or tightly waved crowns of glamour. But the price of perfection was steep. Years of harsh styling, pins, and heavy oils left her natural hair weakened, dull, and unreliable under the demands of film production. As she transitioned into the talkie era, and then into the role of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, wigs became more than a solution, they became part of her persona. Her character's towering hair, its theatrical height and structure, mirrored Gloria's own relationship with fame, something once natural, now constructed. It was not just about hiding thinning hair, it was about maintaining the illusion of eternal stardom. Even in her later public appearances, her wigs remained elaborate, sometimes eccentric, always unmistakably Swanson. Because for a woman who once ruled silent film, the hair still had to speak loudly. Claudette Colbert, perfection by design. Claudette Colbert was the embodiment of sophistication. With her heart-shaped face, impeccable timing, and effortless wit, she brought elegance to both comedy and drama. But Colbert wasn't just an actress, she was a precisionist. Every angle, every detail of her appearance was calculated. And yes, that included her hair, whether it was hers or not. Throughout her career, Claudette was famously particular about how she was filmed. She insisted on being shot from her left side and was deeply involved in her costuming, makeup, and yes, her wigs. Her natural hair, while healthy in her early days, began to thin as she aged, a result of decades of curling, dyeing, and studio stress. But for Colbert, allowing that to affect her image was never an option. She approached wigs not as a crutch, but as a professional choice, an extension of her performance. She used them to maintain consistency from role to role, ensuring she looked camera-ready regardless of the toll the production took. Her wigs were styled with precision, often mirroring her early look, neatly parted, softly waved classic. Even in her later years, as she stepped away from film and into theater and television, her image remained intact. The wigs allowed her to preserve the Claudette Colbert the public remembered, elegant, poised, untouched by time. And in a world that aged its women far too quickly, Colbert made one thing clear: she would define her image, not let it fade. Jean Harlow, the hair that sparked a frenzy, then fell apart. Jean Harlow wasn't just a star, she was a sensation. The original platinum blonde, she sparked a national obsession with pale hair and sultry glamour. But the shimmering look that made her a Hollywood icon was also what led her down a path of irreversible damage, and eventually the quiet, early use of wigs. Harlow's transformation was no accident. In the early 1930s, MGM wanted her to stand out, and blonde wasn't enough, they needed something blinding. Her natural ash blonde hair was stripped with a cocktail of bleach and ammonia, applied weekly by her personal stylist. There were no protective products, no modern techniques, just raw chemicals, heat, and a studio that wanted results. The effect was undeniable. On screen, she glowed like moonlight. Off screen, her hair was another story, brittle, patchy, and breaking at the root. Rumors swirled even in her lifetime that Harlow's hair had suffered so severely, she began relying on wigs and hairpieces to maintain her now iconic look, especially during film reshoots and photo sessions when continuity mattered. But Jean Harlow never let the damage show. Her image was too carefully crafted, too valuable to the studio system. Every public appearance reinforced the illusion of that flawless platinum crown. And even as her natural hair gave out under the weight of Hollywood's expectations, the screen goddess never missed a beat. In the end, her hair didn't just set trends, it set a standard, one so high even her own roots couldn't keep up. Deborah Kerr, the lady knew when to let go. Deborah Kerr was the very definition of elegance. Whether gliding across the beach in From Here to Eternity or holding her composure in The King and I, she brought an air of intelligence and restraint to every performance. But behind the porcelain skin and polished presence was a woman who understood a difficult truth of show business. Sometimes the only way to stay in control was to surrender the little things, including her hair. Kerr's natural hair was soft and fine, and in her early years, it styled easily enough to suit the prim, proper characters she often portrayed. But as she matured and the roles became more emotionally and physically demanding, the stress of constant heat styling and color correction took its toll. With her hair thinning and the cameras still demanding perfection, wigs became her quiet solution. She wasn't loud about it, she never needed to be. Deborah's approach to beauty was understated, and so was her use of wigs. They were natural, elegant, and tailored not to reinvent her, but to preserve the integrity of her image. Her hairpieces allowed her to remain consistent from scene to scene, film to film, year to year, without sacrificing her grace. In a business obsessed with reinvention, Deborah Kerr didn't try to chase trends. She preserved herself, discreetly, deliberately. And if a wig helped her remain the woman the audience adored, she wore it not with shame, but with poise. Jane Russell, the hair had to match the curves. Jane Russell never faded into the background. With her smoldering eyes, hourglass figure, and sharp wit, she brought heat to the screen in a way few actresses could. But while audiences were fixated on her famously statuesque silhouette, what framed it all, her hair, was often far from natural. Russell's image was built on a specific kind of appeal, sultry, strong, and effortlessly glamorous. That meant her hair had to be just as commanding as the rest of her. But her natural hair, while healthy, was never quite as voluminous or polished as the roles required. Between the curls, color demands, and heavy-set styling of the 1940s and 50s, her real hair simply couldn't keep pace. So Jane embraced wigs, and she didn't tiptoe around it. She used them not to hide, but to enhance. Her on-screen hairstyles were perfectly coiffed, shaped to create balance with her bold features and amplify the seductive aura that made her famous. And off-screen, when the lights went down, the wigs often stayed on for photo shoots, interviews, and public appearances where the Jane Russell look had to remain intact. In an era when many actresses wore wigs in secret, Jane treated hers like part of the costume, another tool in her arsenal of impact. For her, it wasn't about pretending. It was about performing and doing it flawlessly. Her curves may have grabbed attention, but her hair sealed the deal. And no matter where it came from, it always made an entrance. Shelley Winters, wigs were her reset button. Shelley Winters never stayed in one box for long. From blonde bombshell to Oscar-winning character actress, her career was a study in transformation. She defied expectations at every turn, and often that meant changing her hair before the world could define her. For Shelley, wigs weren't secret. They were strategy. In her early days, she played the classic Hollywood blonde, curvy, breathy, and marketable. Her hair was bleached, curled, and pushed to fit the mold. But as Shelley grew tired of the roles and the typecasting, her appearance began to shift, first subtly, then boldly. With each career move came a new wig, a new color, a new cut. She shed hair like she shed skin. Unlike many of her peers, Shelley didn't hide her use of wigs. In fact, she embraced it. They gave her freedom from constant salon visits and chemical treatments, especially as her natural hair began to show the signs of overprocessing and age. Her real hair thinned, but she never let that slow her down. On the contrary, it liberated her to become whoever the role or the moment required. Off-screen, she was just as fearless. In interviews and appearances, she'd sometimes switch looks between events. Wigs were her reset button. One day, she was the aging starlet, the next, the seasoned matriarch. Always bold. Always Shelley. She didn't cling to one image, she owned them all. And the wigs? They weren't hiding anything. They were telling her story one reinvention at a time. Kim Novak, the blonde, was a performance. Kim Novak was the kind of beauty that felt untouchable, icy, perfect, and just a little out of reach. With her porcelain skin and flawless blonde waves, she seemed sculpted for the screen. But the image the world saw, especially in films like Vertigo, was crafted with precision and often with the help of wigs. Novak's natural hair was light brown and fine, not the platinum bombshell look Columbia Pictures insisted on. To shape her into a rival for Marilyn Monroe, the studio subjected her to aggressive bleaching and styling that left her natural hair fragile and inconsistent. When the cameras demanded consistency and her hair couldn't deliver, wigs became the silent solution. But Kim wasn't just a passive participant in her transformation. She understood the power of image. Her wigs weren't just for continuity. They were carefully curated elements of her persona. She wore them to protect what little remained of her own hair, yes, but also to create distance between herself and the women she played. Especially in Vertigo, where her dual roles called for specific, controlled aesthetics, the wigs weren't just costume, they were character. Off-screen, Novak preferred simplicity, often retreating from the public gaze entirely. But when she did appear, the blonde was always flawless, even if it came from a wig stand rather than a salon chair. Kim Novak didn't just wear wigs, she performed through them. Cool, composed, and controlled, every strand was part of the illusion, and that's exactly how she wanted it. And Sheridan, Hollywood's oomph girl, needed backup. And Sheridan was dubbed the oomph girl, a title she wore with playful defiance and just enough smirk to let you know she was in on the joke. With her striking red hair, smoky voice, and magnetic screen presence, she gave 1940s audiences a new kind of femme fatale, tough, funny, and real. But behind the signature curls and effortless charm, and had a secret weapon of her own, a growing collection of wigs. Her natural hair, a soft auburn hue, was striking in its own right. But Hollywood had other plans. Over time, studios pushed for brighter, redder, glossier shades, requiring frequent dye jobs and heat styling that damaged her strands. Film sets offered little room for recovery. Scenes needed to match, and continuity was king. When her hair began to thin from the constant pressure, wigs became the quiet answer. Unlike some stars who wore wigs purely for glamour and used them like a professional tool, They ensured consistency under the harsh lights and allowed her to focus on performance instead of appearance. She wasn't vain, she was efficient. The wigs gave her freedom from the time and toll of constant maintenance. And when she wasn't filming, she often kept things simple, letting her hair breathe. But the moment she stepped into character, whether a wartime sweetheart or a sharp-tongued socialite, the wig was in place, and the oomph girl was ready to steal the scene again. It wasn't just about beauty. It was about being ready every single time. Eleanor Parker, a face that changed and hair that followed. Eleanor Parker could be anyone. A fiery prisoner in Caged. A noble baroness in The Sound of Music. A villain, a victim, a romantic lead. Her range was staggering. She wasn't typecast because she never let herself be. And with every transformation, her hair had to transform too, even when her own couldn't keep up. Parker's natural hair was a soft reddish-brown, not quite as adaptable as the roles she was constantly asked to play. In the days when actresses were expected to be chameleons without pause, the demands were unrelenting. Stylists pulled, curled, dyed, and re-dyed to suit the next film, the next photo shoot, the next persona. Over time, the wear showed. Breakage, thinning, the quiet erosion of her natural beauty under layers of artificial perfection. But Eleanor was not the kind of woman to be defeated by image. She turned to wigs not as camouflage, but as tools, par her craft. From sharp 1950s bobs to lush period ringlets, her wigs became part of her method. Each one helped her disappear into another woman, another life. Off-screen, she remained fiercely private, her true self rarely glimpsed. The wigs, like her roles, were a form of control. They allowed her to shape the story rather than be shaped by it. Eleanor Parker didn't chase the spotlight. She mastered the shadows. And when the spotlight did find her, she was always ready, with a new face, a new voice, and a perfectly chosen head of hair. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the wig was part of the performance. Zsa Zsa Gabor didn't just live in Hollywood, she was Hollywood. Glamorous, eccentric, and unapologetically fabulous, she turned her life into a performance of wealth, wit, and wigs. While others in old Hollywood wore hairpieces in secrecy, Zsa Zsa wore hers like crown and made sure everyone noticed. Born with fine, light brown hair, Gabor quickly realized that her natural look wouldn't cut it in the spotlight she demanded. The cameras wanted volume, the red carpets demanded drama, and Zsa Zsa, well, she wanted to be unforgettable. Her solution? Wigs. Dozens of them. Each more sculpted, more styled, more Zsa Zsa than the last. By the 1960s, she rarely appeared in public without one. Towering blonde bouffants, perfectly curled bobs, shimmering waves, they were an essential part of her image. Not merely functional, but theatrical. Over the years, her natural hair became increasingly fragile from styling and age, but she didn't try to fight it. She simply moved on to something bigger. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Gabor didn't wear wigs to hide. She wore them to shine. They weren't a mask, they were an extension of her persona, just like her diamonds, her gowns, and her legendary one-liners. Zsa Zsa didn't believe in subtlety. She believed in sparkle. And whether it came from a tiara or a teased wig reaching the heavens, she made sure of one thing. Darling, you were going to remember her. Behind the glamour of old Hollywood was a quiet, shared truth. Beauty came at a cost. The wigs worn by these legendary actresses weren't simply about vanity. They were tools of survival, resilience, and professional mastery. They helped women navigate an industry that demanded perfection at all times, regardless of age, health, or personal sacrifice. For many, these hairpieces were a form of control in a world that often offered them very little. In honoring these 12 women, we're not pulling back the curtain to diminish them. We're doing it to admire them more fully. Each of these actresses faced intense pressure to maintain an illusion. And yet, they delivered unforgettable performances, shaped entire generations of cinema, and left behind legacies far more enduring than any hairstyle. Wigs didn't make them less real. They made them more human, more fascinating, more heroic. If you found their stories as moving, surprising, or inspiring as we did, we'd love to hear from you. Which actress's story resonated most with you? Did anyone surprise you? Let us know in the comments below. We read every one. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, about the untold sides of fame, beauty, and history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss what's behind the next curtain. Thank you for watching, and for remembering that even legends are human.